All right, strap in, everyone. We're diving deep into Dune prophecy. This new HBO series has got everybody buzzing, and you know what? You sent in a mountain of articles and reviews for us to unpack. What's caught your eye with this one?
You know, what really strikes me is this isn't just another sci-fi show. It's like they're going all the way back to the beginning. The origin story of the Bene Gesserit.
Oh, wow.
Like way before the Dune movies we saw recently. 10,000 years before Paul Atreides even shows up.
10,000 years.
Yeah.
Talk about a prequel.
I know, right?
So we're uncovering those Bene Gesserit secrets, eh?
Yeah.
I saw you marked up a lot of Game of Thrones comparisons in the stuff you sent over.
Yeah.
Is that what's got you hooked?
It's definitely a big part of it. A ton of reviewers, they're picking up on that. It's that whole political intrigue thing. Alliance is constantly shifting. Everybody's scrambling for power.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got that Game of Thrones vibe going strong. But what makes Dune prophecy stand out? What makes it more than just another fantasy power struggle?
Well, one reviewer said something that really hit home for me. They described Dune prophecy as like, imagine Game of Thrones, right? But told from the perspective of those master manipulators, like Varys or Littlefinger. We're seeing everything unfold through the eyes of the Bene Gesserit. They're working behind the scenes, they're pulling the strings, playing that long game.
Now, that's interesting. So we're not just watching who ends up on the throne,
Huh?
but who's controlling the people who control the throne.
You got it. And the Bene Gesserit. With their abilities and long-term plans, they're the ones holding those strings.
Wow, so it really makes you question everybody's motives. Wonder who's really calling the shots.
Exactly.
Now, you flagged some criticisms of the premiere episode, too. Anything that really jumped out?
Yeah, a few reviewers thought some of the characters initially felt a little, well, archetypal, like we've seen them in other fantasy shows.
A little too familiar, you mean?
Exactly. You know, you've got the ruthless leader, the princess who wants to rebel, those kind of classic characters.
Right, right. Do you think that's a deal breaker for the show? Or something they can move past as things go on?
Hard to say right now. Some reviewers thought the characters lacked the depth that made Game of Thrones so gripping early on. But, I mean, come on, we're only one episode in.
True, true.
Plenty of time for the characters to grow and surprise us.
Good point. It's all about the long game, right? Just like the Bene Gesserit themselves.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, let's dig into them. Dune prophecy takes us back to their very beginnings.
Yeah.
What have you found in the sources about their origins and how they do things?
Oh, it's fascinating stuff. One source, they described the Bene Gesserit training as this mix of, get this, sorcery, transmutation, eugenics, and mothering, all rolled into one.
What? Seriously?
Yeah. And they've got these incredible abilities, like the truth sayers. They can see right through lies. And then there's the selective breeding to shape bloodlines over generations. Crazy dedication.
It's like they're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers.
Exactly.
Makes you wonder what their ultimate goal is with all that manipulation.
Doesn't it? One reviewer pointed out that Dune prophecy also touches on the limitations society puts on women in this world. And the Bene Gesserit. They basically use those limitations to their advantage, turn those restrictions into power.
So they're taking a system meant to hold them back and flipping it into a tool for their agenda.
Yeah.
That's pretty clever.
Right.
Adds a whole other layer to their motivations.
For sure. Makes you wonder if they're fighting the system or just using it for their own ends.
It's like a moral gray area.
Totally. A
Yeah.
fascinating gray area. And, you know, we can't talk about complex systems without bringing up the Butlerian Jihad.
Right.
The war against thinking machines, the thing that shapes the entire Dune universe.
Right.
Why this world is so afraid of AI.
You highlighted a bunch of sources that mention that. Is that because you're really into the whole AI angle? Or is there something specific about it that caught your eye?
Well, I mean, the Butlerian Jihad is like this turning point in Dune, right? Sets the stage for everything that comes after. But one of the sources you sent over, they actually argued that Dune prophecy kind of missed a chance here. They could have explored the parallels with how we feel about AI today, but instead we just get this quick Terminator-style flashback.
Oh, interesting. So they're saying the show could have used this historical event to make a statement about our relationship with technology today. You think that's a fair critique?
Yeah, I do. It feels like a missed opportunity. Especially now, AI is such a hot topic.
Yeah.
Imagine if they had, like, really explored what led up to the Butlerian Jihad. You know, the different viewpoints people had about machines becoming intelligent, the ethical questions. It could have been a really powerful way to tie the past to the present, don't you think?
I see your point. That would have been pretty cool to see. But you know what? Even though they didn't dive into those parallels, the show does a great job visually. with showing us that deep-rooted fear of AI.
Oh, for sure. Like that scene where the little kid's robot toy freaks everyone out at court.
Yes.
Talk about visual storytelling. Right. Right away, you see how much trauma humanity still carries from the Butlerian Jihad. And nobody has to explain it with words.
It's so powerful. You get the weight of history, the gravity of that moment. Makes you think, are we really that far off from those fears ourselves?
Yeah.
With how fast technology is changing.
It's a scary thought, isn't it?
It is.
But it's what makes Dune Prophecy so good, you know? It forces us to think about our own relationship with technology.
Totally agree. Speaking of the way the show tells the story, I noticed some of the sources mentioned the voiceover and flashbacks. Especially in that first episode. They felt like maybe it was a bit too much. What are your thoughts on that?
I get where they're coming from. I mean, the flashbacks look incredible visually, right? But it might be information overload for people who aren't already familiar with Dune.
So it's a balancing act, right? Giving newcomers enough background without bogging the story down with too much exposition. What could they have done differently, do you think?
Maybe they could have unveiled the information more slowly. You know, dropping little hints, visual clues,
Yeah.
let the audience put the pieces together along the way.
Yeah. It would have been more immersive, right?
Exactly.
And let viewers actively participate in the world building. But hey, let's not forget, there are a lot of Dune fans out there who are probably geeking out over seeing these iconic parts of the story come to life on screen.
Oh, absolutely. It's the challenge of any prequel, really, trying to please both the diehards and the newbies.
Right, right. Speaking of pleasing the audience, you pointed out one source that talked about the show's marketing. They argued it might have missed the mark when it comes to attracting those casual viewers, the ones who like the recent Dune movies. What was their thinking?
Well, they said that promoting Dune Prophecy as this 10,000-year prequel could be intimidating, especially for people who aren't already super into Dune.
So it's like, hey, remember those cool movies you enjoyed? Well, this is about something totally different that happened ages ago.
Pretty much.
And while the hardcore fans might be all over that, someone who just casually enjoyed the movies might be like, how does this even connect to what I know?
Yeah, exactly. They might wonder how it's relevant at all.
Makes you think, could they have framed it differently? Maybe something that highlights those connections to the films without scaring off the newcomers.
It's a good point, because Dune Prophecy is ultimately a story about power and ambition, right? And the crazy things people do to get what they want, those are themes everyone can relate to. Doesn't matter if you're a hardcore fan or not.
That's true. Now let's talk characters. We mentioned how some of them felt a little bit like archetypes, especially at first. But there's one character who seems to have really grabbed people's attention.
You must be talking about Desmond Hart,
Yeah.
played by Travis Fimmel. He's been called everything from captivating to terrifying, totally different from everyone else.
You marked several sources that praise his performance. What is it about Desmond Hart that makes him stand out so much?
He's got this mystique about him, you know? He's obviously powerful, but his motives, they're a total mystery. You can never tell what he's thinking or what he might do next.
So he's the wild card, the unpredictable element in this whole power game.
Exactly. And that unpredictability, it makes him so compelling to watch. You're always on the edge of your seat wondering what he'll do next.
It's like he keeps you guessing the whole time. No wonder people are drawn to that. So we've covered a lot of ground here, those Game of Thrones comparisons, all the Bene Gesserit stuff, the Butlerian Jihad, how the show tells the story, even talked about the marketing. What stands out to you the most from all these different takes?
I think for me, it's how Dune Prophecy explores the idea of power. Like, who really has it? Who wants it? What are they willing to do to get it? And we see that on so many different levels. The great houses, all their political scheming, the Bene Gesserit with their subtle manipulation, and then you've got people like Desmond Hart who just operate outside of all the rules, makes them even more dangerous.
Yeah, it really is like a multi-dimensional chess game, right? Each move having these ripple effects. And you're right, those wild cards like Hart just make it so much more interesting.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that one reviewer described Dune Prophecy as Game of Thrones from the perspective of like a Varys or Littlefinger. Think that comparison holds up? Or is Dune Prophecy doing its own thing?
There are definitely some similarities, for sure. The political intrigue, that sense that things aren't what they seem. But I think Dune Prophecy is unique because of that focus on the Bene Gesserit. It's not just families fighting for power. We're seeing how those families are being manipulated by these women working behind the scenes.
It makes you wonder, who's really calling the shots, right? Is it the emperors and dukes? Or is it the Bene Gesserit pulling all the strings?
Exactly. And it adds this whole layer of moral ambiguity. Are the Bene Gesserits the good guys or the bad guys? Are they working towards some greater good? Or are they just as obsessed with power as everyone else?
Those are good questions. And I love that the show doesn't try to give us easy answers. It makes you think, makes you want to discuss it. So all things considered, good and bad, what's your verdict on Dune Prophecy? Would you recommend it?
I think it's a show with a lot of potential. It's got flaws, definitely. Some people might find it slow, maybe think some of the characters are a bit too familiar at times. But it's also beautiful to look at. It's got these really rich themes and ideas.
It sounds like it's a show that you really have to pay attention to, not something to just have on in the background.
Definitely. You got to be engaged with it. It makes you think, makes you question, makes you want to dive deeper into the Dune world.
Well, I think you've done a fantastic job of walking us through all this, helped us unpack the key themes, see different critical viewpoints, figure out what makes the show unique. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up?
Just this Dune Prophecy, it's not just a prequel or a spin-off. It's a story that can stand on its own. It's about power, control, about the choices we make when we're up against these huge forces. If you're looking for something that will challenge you, get you thinking, and stay with you after it's over, Dune Prophecy is worth checking out.
Very well said. So there you have it, folks, a deep dive into Dune Prophecy. We talked about those Game of Thrones parallels, the Bene Gesserit and all their secrets,
Yeah.
the legacy of the Balerian Jihad, and those really interesting characters that make this world come alive. But here's the big question. What did you find most interesting? What really stood out to you? Let us know. We'd love to hear your thoughts.